So in verse 3, this little lady, she's talked to about borrowing money. The man of God talks to her about borrowing. And as I said last week, I cringe as a pastor when I hear people talk about borrowing money in the midst of a famine. Why? Because I've learned, my observation is that most people, not all, but most people or many people, they borrow in the midst of a famine and they do nothing more than convert it into bread. They turn it into a vacation and put it on their credit card at 20-something%. Those are the types of things we're talking about. So here's what I want to understand. This woman did borrow in the midst of a famine, but guess what she did? She did it on a word from God. She did it under instructions. She did it under a plan. She had a plan. She didn't do it based upon some kind of impulse borrowing. She didn't do it out of some kind of gratification borrowing, like, man, I deserve this. She didn't borrow to go on a vacation. She didn't borrow because she deserved it or because the economic indicators are beginning to look better. She didn't do it for those reasons. I want you to notice that she borrowed because she felt she had a word from God. It was confirmed. She had a plan and she had instructions. And she began to work that plan. Verse 5, it says that she did as she was instructed. That's something else that I noticed. Many people, they have a plan, but they don't do the plan. She did the plan, and the supernatural took over. So we go natural and the supernatural, but I want you to notice something here, and this is what most people miss. I know many of you probably read this story many times, but I want you to know there's stuff we miss in this story. Number one, at the end of an undeniable miracle, how many of you would agree this woman has just experienced an undeniable miracle? At the end of an undeniable miracle, I want you to know something. The woman still has her bills. At the end of an undeniable miracle, there's still a creditor threatening her and wanting to take away her children. At the end of a miracle. I mean, come on, church. How is it possible that the supernatural shows up in this lady's life, a miracle we all agree upon, and she still has debt? She still has bills. What does she get? What did the supernatural produce? It produced more of what she already had. It didn't produce what she wanted. It produced what she already had. More of what she already had. You know, in the midst of this economic challenge, famine that we have in our nation, as a pastor, I've sat down with so many people. And I'm beginning to feel like a broken record. We don't have to have more appointments with each other. Just play the old counsel I've given you over in your mind just one more time, because it's probably going to be very close to the same. It's going to sound something like this. You need more finances? Revisit how God's blessed you in the past. Revisit how God's used you in the past. Revisit things like old contacts that have been a blessing in your past. Revisit things like a client list from the past. Things like suppliers from the past. I was talking to a person one time, over the last 10 years or so, and he said to me, Pastor, man, I got some challenges, and pray for me. And I used this conversation, talked to him about it, and he goes, well, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do it. I go, what do you mean? You don't want to pay your bills? You don't want to feed your family? I really don't want to do it, because you know how long it took me to get these nail bags off my hips? I really don't want to put on the nail bags again. And immediately I knew it's something he's been thinking about. I go, why are you saying that? He goes, well, I have a neighbor that's offered, he knows I know a lot about construction and work like that. He goes, I could build my neighbor a fence. Yeah, there's probably $300 or $400 profit in it, maybe even $500 worth of profit in it. Take me 3 or 4 nights and maybe a Saturday, a couple nights and a Saturday. But man, I just don't want to do it. And he goes, and not only that, over the next few minutes, we talked about probably a dozen opportunities he has. He's like, it's almost like they put out on a bulletin board somewhere to call me for construction work. It's almost like I got this big neon sign over my head Now I'm exaggerating at this point, okay? I've left the story, and now I'm exaggerating. I'm exaggerating I want you to get it. It's almost like this guy had a big old neon sign that says, I know construction. I know construction. You understand what I'm saying? It's almost like heaven's got arrows pointing at him like this. But him, in his mind, he thinks, that's going backwards, and I don't want to do that. No, let me tell you something. There's a famine in the land. And when there's a famine in the land, we got to protect seed. So what did the little lady do? She wanted cash. She didn't want more oil. But the miracle was something she already had. So do you understand what happens when the supernatural is over? And this is the other thing that I think most people miss. The miracle is over. Now she has oil, more oil that she really didn't want. And here's the other thing I think most people miss. She now has more bills than when she started. She now has more debt than when she started. She had debt. She couldn't pay her debt. She borrowed more. Now she still has the original debt. She has more debt from borrowing to prepare for the miracle. And now she's got all this oil. How's that possible that you're preparing for a miracle and now you got more debt? Well, this little lady did it. So now she goes to Elisha in verse 7. She goes to Elisha, and can you imagine what she's thinking? Thanks. Thanks. I knew better to talk to a preacher about this. Thanks. More debt. I've got more debt. And I got all this oil stinking up my house. We started in the natural. We moved towards the supernatural. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to just kind of put on your seatbelt for a minute, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to say to you what my doctor said to me more than once in my life. This will only sting for a moment. My intention is not to hurt us, church. My intention is to help us. Most people have no idea how to understand the supernatural workings of God. If you receive a miracle from God, listen to this, church, I believe this, it comes with responsibility. Yes. When the supernatural shows up in your life, it's for a purpose.